Nitika Krishan, who is Associate Director, KPMG in India. She has an experience of 20 years plus in urban planning. I request Ms. Krishan to come up on the stage, please, and introduce the speakers.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this session on making affordable, sustainable, and innovative housing a reality in cities. At the very outset, I would like to make a brief introduction of our esteemed panelists that have gathered here on the forum today to share their learned views on the subject. I would at the foremost like to invite Professor Dr. P.S.N. Rao, Director, School of Planning and Architecture, on the dais, please. Professor P.S.N. Rao is an eminent personality in the architecture, town planning, and urban development field, and does not need any introduction in this sector, at least in India. He has been a very proactive academician, consultant, policy advocate for the last 32 years. He is a trained architect, civil engineer, and urban planner, and currently he's the director of the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, under the Ministry of HRD, Government of India. He's also the chairman of the Delhi Urban Arts Commission since 2014. Welcome, Dr. Rao. Next, I would like to welcome Mr. A.K. Jain. Again, Mr. Jain does not need any introduction for a person who has been following the urban landscape in the country, and especially in Delhi. He has been a part of my academic journey. He was the erstwhile Commissioner Planning from Delhi Development Authority. He's currently a visiting faculty for planning and architecture in various colleges and institutions. He's also a member of the MOUD committee on DDA and is an ex-member of UN Habitat. Welcome. Welcome, sir. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Sunil Agarwal, Managing Director, Black Olive Ventures, onto the dais, please. Mr. Agarwal has over 26 years of experience in the real estate sector and is the founder of Black Olive Ventures, which is a real estate advisory services company where he advises over 76 banks and financial institutions on lands and building valuation. Previously, he was the co-founder and CEO of South Asian Real Estate, a private equity-backed real estate development firm. So his expertise is across various geographies, asset classes, and functional domains. Welcome, Mr. Agarwal. Lastly, I would like to welcome Ms. Nahid Majid onto the dais, please. Nahid is a chartered town planner and urban designer and is the global director for cities at KPMG International. Her work focuses on sharing best practices and securing investment through viability testing. She has been a director at the Princess Foundation for Architecture and director at CAB, and ensuring sustainability, placemaking, and good urban design practices in making cities inclusive. So as you would see from the introductions that I have made, we have attempted to invite professionals from a diverse background who are basically clued into the affordable housing segment so that they can share their views, their insights, their professional acumen, and nuggets of knowledge with you. So we have an adequate representation on this panel from the academics, the trainings, specialized areas of architectural and planning consulting, investment as sectors of affordable housing, which are finding a voice at this platform. I thank you all for making time, and I thank the audience who have taken the initiative and the time out to be a part of this session. Thank you so much. At the outset, I would request Dr. P.S.N. Rao to make certain introductory remarks on the subject, and then we will take it And at the end, I would request the audience if you could have your queries and any questions that you may like to address to the esteemed panel would be taken up after the panel discussion. So if I may request to hold you off on that during this conversation, I hope we can have an enriching dialogue and all of us would gain out of it. Thank you. Professor Rao, please.
Thank you. I hope this is on. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Nitika ji. And I think this is a very important area that you have chosen. Affordable housing and sustainability. I think one of the basic requirements for any society is undoubtedly housing, because housing is where the family is nurtured, and that is where we spend a substantial amount of our time. People say that it's not the home, but it's the office where you spend most of your time, of your waking time. But nevertheless, at least during our growing years, during the formative years of a child, most of the time is actually spent at home. So home is where the heart is, as they say. Housing is extremely important, not just as basic shelter, but there are several other social and economic dimensions. So it is important that we all live, families are nurtured in good quality housing where there is enough space for the conduct of various activities. And if that is not available, then the childhood trajectory that one goes through, that will not be proper, and that affects the psychology at much later. So these days these dimensions are also being made very loud and clear. So it is not that we all need a house, we know that it's a basic element. Roti kapda or makan, shelter is something basic. सबके लिए एक घर होना चाहिए, लेकिन क्यों होना चाहिए? It's much more than a mere shelter. It's much more than four walls and a roof. So the social, economic, psychological dimensions of housing are extremely important. And if we have to get that, then the question of space comes in, the question of dimensions come in, and that is where the question of affordability comes in. Because if you are able to afford a decent place to live in, where you have a good neighborhood, where you have parks and playgrounds, where you have schools, where the family members can interact with each other, where children can go out and play with each other, when all these are there, then there is no problem, because you have enough space, you can afford that kind of a neighborhood environment. But what happens when most of us cannot afford that? So the concept of affordability creeps in there, and is it that nothing can be done if you don't have enough money? It is not like that. So different civilizations, different communities and cultures across the globe have tried to tackle this. We are not the only country where there are problems with housing. There are many other nations in the developing world where funds are a problem, affordability is a problem. We can't really afford much. So if you look at many of the South Asian examples, for instance, they've been able to tackle their problems, and a decent size home is provided in a decent neighborhood where families can live, and where you don't necessarily have to cough up huge amounts of money. So it is possible, affordable housing is a possibility. All you need is a certain way in which you can tweak your urban planning, certain ways in which you can tweak the urban land economics, certain ways in which you can modify your policies, and certain ways in which you can bring in, adapt and adopt new technologies. And if you are able to build that ecosystem, then certainly affordable housing can be made a reality. And by doing this, I think the long-term benefits are very many. So I think with these few initial comments, I'll just stop here, and let's also listen to the other speakers, and then we'll take it up further from there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I think there's a button here. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Is this audible?
Yeah, it's audible.
So, sir, what I hear from you, that means is, while you mentioned that housing is a basic need for all of us, the connotation of a affordable housing ecosystem is where you would like access, equity, delivery and maybe a fulfillment of qualitative thresholds also, so that the entire ecosystem can function very rightfully and very richfully for its end users. When we come to the question of affordable housing, one of the most important arenas which we have seen in the last 20-30 years is that the role of public housing which has come up, and we have seen certain very distinct sectors and phases in which it has evolved. We had the phase in the 1970s when HUDCO as an organization was set up, which was set up with the intent of providing affordable houses. We saw the ULCAR being set up in 1976. In the 1980s, we saw the National Housing Bank being set up, and we came out with the first national housing policy in 88. Then 2000 onwards is where we saw a paradigm shift in the affordable housing segment, where there were certain very central and state government incentives which were given to this particular sector. We had the National Urban Housing and Habitat Policy, which for the first time enunciated about housing for all, with an emphasis on the vulnerable sections of the society. So, and after that we had many government launched schemes like environmental improvement of urban slums. VAMBE came in. We had the Valmiki Ambedkar Yojana. We had the BSUP, the IHSDP, and then finally the JNRM and Rajiv Awas Yojana. So to talk about the role of the public sector housing, I would like to invite Mr. A.K. Jain to share his views and give opening remarks on the sector. Sir, please.
Thank you, Nikita. Thank you for inviting me in this August gathering and giving me opportunity to put up my views on affordable, sustainable and innovative housing. In fact, I want to draw your attention to the 4 events which have taken place very recently. One is the Prime Minister Awas Yojana. It started in 2014 and its aims to build about 12 million houses by 2022. That means within next 1 year. And it has already achieved about 10 million houses out of say 12 million, which is by itself a very laudable achievement, never done in India. The second thing every one of us have suffered and experienced is the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has changed the whole concept of housing. The housing and cities have to be not only sustainable but also healthy. The third thing is the 4th industrial revolution. If you see the business and industry, they have gone for a quantum leap in terms of algorithms, new technology, new systems, new communication channels. But unfortunately, housing and building sector has yet to adopt it fully. The 4th thing is this again 2015 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we have to basically think over where we are going and where we want to go. If we talk about affordable housing, in mega cities like Delhi, 80 to 90% of the cost of house pertains to the land component. So that means that sometimes we are too much focusing on the materials or the labor, reducing the plinth area of the houses, which may be misplaced. We have to think about density, FAR, best use of the land, so that the land cost is minimized. Also services like water supply, energy, etc., which are more affordable, which are not concurrent, costly. And if we are talking about sustainable housing and low carbon housing, it has to have a low footprint, it has to be compact, it has to be dense, especially in mega cities like Delhi. So we have to review and revise our whole concepts that sometimes we feel that if we are providing high density housing or high rise housing, it will adversely affect the services, which is not factual, which is in fact contrary to the affordability. And the transmission losses of the services become much less if it is compact and if it is planned in a more dense and optimum manner. So another thing which is confronting India and which we have seen with the heavy migrant laborers migrating to their cities in Jharkhand or Bengal or Bihar in last 1 year, that we have to maximize the opportunities for jobs, and we have to accept the reality or the new norm of work from home. In this respect, the whole concept of land use, single land use zoning has to change in favor of the mixed land use, and we have to provide work spaces within the home or community spaces where the ladies and the women, especially of the poor sector, can work, and perhaps some space for vegetable markets or informal sector vending spaces. These are very important, and these have to be tied up with the housing. These have to be tied up with the residential areas. And we know that every city generates about 60% of the GDP and 70% of the jobs. So we have to provide for maximum jobs in the cities through urbanization, through housing, through construction, because construction sector is providing employment to 10 to 14%. It is now about only 9 to 10%, but earlier it was 14% before the pandemic. And as we are facing this shortage of labor, we have to go for new systems, innovative systems. That means prefabricated and factory produced housing, which is economical, which is guaranteed in terms of quality, and which has proper services. Another important thing which has been projected by Niti Aayog about 3 years back, that we have to maximize our residential space per capita, which used to be 5.9 square meter per capita in 2012. That they have projected that it will be about 6 times, 35 square meter per capita in 2047, keeping in view the economic growth of India. And whether we like it or not, we have to provide and revise our standards for housing, and we have to perhaps review the concept of affordability. As we see that DD advertised its low-cost TWS, LIG housing in last 4 or 5 years, but there were no takers, because now even the poor people want a house where they can stay for next about 30 to 50 years. So they don't want a pigeonhole kind of house. That means that we have to review the whole concept of minimum dwelling unit, and it has to correspond with the economic growth of the family, economic growth of the city, and this. Another important thing which we have missed or which we have to focus is composite redevelopment. Our cities, for example, Delhi has about 2,000 unauthorized colonies with fragmented property ownership, with fragmented plots, without proper services, without open spaces, without proper roads, and in case of emergency, not even the ambulance can reach there. So we have to focus on composite redevelopment, and mind you, about half of the city, even Delhi, which is said to be a planned city, is unplanned. So we can have a composite redevelopment of these areas, bring together these fragmented plots into group housing with proper services, open space, and parking, etc. This is very important. Then we have to also, when we talk about innovation, we have to not only talk about the energy efficiency and energy conservation, and we have to graduate from the era of photovoltaics to a new technology. For example, there are now new windows, new glass panes, new finishings on the roof, etc., which can generate electricity and electricity, new solar energy, new solar windows, new storage systems, and the microgrids of the energy can make the whole settlement or colony self-sufficient in energy without depending on the grid. And this is reality. So if we are taking up housing, whether it is the NBCC or the DDA or the HUDCO, let us think about these things. Then utilities and services have to be smart. For example, SCADA system in water supply can save water and can make it more efficient. Leakages can be checked. Leakages can be checked and corrected from a central control unit. Then we have new technologies which convert noise into energy, which where the building can be an oxygen bioreactor. Building has a respirational system, its own respirational system, so that we are not suffering because of the air pollution. And building can also be designed as a detox tower. So all these things are very necessary, and for this there are standards and technologies which are already available, which we have to bring into the housing sector. For example, we have to prepare a sustainability roadmap 2030, which aligns with the sustainable development goal. And this is important not only for the private sector, but also for the housing which is being done by the government sector, whether it's the DDA or HUDCO or any organization.
So, that means
we have to have a GRI mapping, AA 1000, AS 2008 principles, and circular and safe and intelligent system of construction and infrastructure development. So this standard operating procedures, disclosures, and performance dashboards, tectonics, and supply chain management can change the whole scenario of housing, because what we are doing today is going to live at least for 50 years. So we have to be futuristic. We have not to live in this 50-year-old era, whether affordable housing meant small pigeonholes, small one-room houses with very deficient services, no open spaces, no modern utilities. So this is what we have to look forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, what I understand from your sharing of views is that the role which the public sector will have to play to act as a facilitator and as an enabler because of the changing paradigm which has come into the system, whether it is because of the pandemic or whether it is because of the changing lifestyles and requirements based on economic transitions, and maybe some requirements of new systems which are like either working from home or let's say even the aspirations of the new age millennials. So keeping that in view, there has to be a positive, proactive role which the social organizations, I would say the public organizations have to play in the sector. Now, if I were to pick up from the same thought process, sir, in the last 1 year, the entire world has witnessed the roller coaster ride on which all of us have been because of the pandemic of COVID-19. That has put a stress on the flow of investment, finances into the sector. I would now like to bring in Mr. Agarwal into the discussion, and I would like him to share his views on what are the investment sources for the affordable housing segment. Is it something which is still viable? Where does the business cycle for an affordable housing sector take place before the pandemic era, post the pandemic era, and where do we see ourselves going from here? Mr. Agarwal, please.
Thank you, Nitika. Am I audible? I mean, the feeling that we get is that we were audible at the last bench. Okay. So tackling your first question, I mean, where are we before pandemic, in pandemic, after pandemic? I think any statistics that you pick up, World Bank statistics, Government of India estimates, any estimate, I think when it comes to affordable housing, there is a bottomless demand. And I'll just quote, when I was actually interviewing for becoming a master's in housing with SPA and CEPT, and ultimately I went to CEPT, I had this book called the Manorama Yearbook. And the Manorama Yearbook said there is a gap of 20 million houses, and I don't think so that statistics has changed from 1994. So from 1994 we must have grown, but the deficit of housing is still there. So I think, Nitika, there is just no way that affordable housing will lose its sheen for any investor who wants to invest in it, or any source of capital. So I don't think so affordable housing is there's any shortage of any capital. How has affordable housing performed? We used to do about 2,400 valuations. I represent a valuation firm, an advisory firm, and so our valuation business was about 2,400 valuations before pandemic. During pandemic, it fell to half or less. Now, some of you may be surprised that there was still some business during pandemic, but if there was a business, that is why we survived. So maybe for the months of April, May, June last year, there was very little business because people were more, afraid of how much value they have lost. So there were no fresh buys in those 3 months, or very little buys. But beyond that, the volumes came back to 1,200, and today we are doing in excess of 3,000, which means that the market has not only reached where the pandemic was, but affordable housing, the market has gone beyond where it was in pandemic. So some of that may be pent-up demand, but there is a demand, and there will be always a demand of affordable housing for the next 20 years or 15 years that I can see in this country. So that's, I think, question number one. Two, as far as investment in affordable housing is concerned, I don't know how many of you realize that what is affordable in Delhi is not maybe the housing that is built on the periphery or 20 kilometers away from the periphery. There are a lot of houses that are available in the so-called affordable price range within Delhi, and these are Lal Dora Rands, what we call as urban villages. Now, urban villages have a huge amount of issues when it comes to infrastructure. The bylaws do not they do not allow buildings to go more than 2 or 3 story high. But what has happened is all over Delhi, all over Noida, all over places around Delhi, there has been a mushrooming of these so-called houses which are called the Lal Dora houses. And banks and NBFCs are all funding these houses. Now, most of them are illegal. They do not have a sanction map. They go up to 5-6 stories high. They do not have adequate fire provisions. But people are buying, and banks are funding, and everybody is making a business out of it. So there is a lot of investment which is chasing, these kind of housing, where you can sell a house between 25 lakhs and 30 lakhs. And there are houses which are even up to 15 lakhs or 20 lakhs. Now, these are all houses which are, there is a demand. So my first thing that I would just want to suggest is that densification of a neighborhood not necessarily is bad if you put in the infrastructure and the right amenities. So I think one thing that can bring in affordable housing is the fact that you put in right policies and not create a chaos in the city, but you try and realize that that is the way. Because affordable housing doesn't mean that you are going to give a house in the periphery of the city where there is little urban transport, no jobs for people to do, and therefore they are commuting every day, spending a lot of time and money, energy, effort, and so in the absence of that infrastructure, you cannot have affordable housing in far-flung areas. You have to provide affordable housing pretty close to the work centers. The other thing is that I was sitting in a seminar long back, and I had Mr. Niranjan Hiranandani. Mr. Niranjan Hiranandani is a large developer in India, develops all luxury housing. My company used to develop housing, and we used to sell housing at about 2,200 to 2,500 rupees a foot. And he said that affordable housing in India will be anything in the region of 6,000 rupees a foot, and I laughed at that. Today, when I go back, and before coming here, I did a recheck from my office and called a couple of my friends, and I said, what is a Lal Dora house in Mayur Vihar of Delhi cost? And the answer was that they are selling 500 square feet houses, guys, 5 to 550 square feet houses for a price of 28 lakhs, which makes it almost equal to 6,000 rupees a foot. And then if you do the math, or what's happening, they say we spent about 1100 rupees a foot in construction, which is about 6 lakh rupees in construction. So out of 28 lakh rupees, there is 6 lakh rupees of construction. And I said, what is it that you buy the land for? And any price in any plot which is of a decent location, the cost of land per square foot is above 2,900 rupees a foot. So 6,000 का मकान बेचते हैं, 3,000 की लैंड खरीदते हैं, उसके ऊपर 1,000 रुपये का कंस्ट्रक्शन करते हैं, and 2,000 rupees is the margin. That is what is happening to affordable housing. So you're basically providing a poor quality access, you're giving deficient infrastructure. Is there a market? Yes, there's a bottomless market because people don't get anything decent at that location in 25 to 30 lakhs. Now, there are banks who are funding these so-called illegitimate projects at an interest rate of 12%. Whereas if you have seen what is happening, there are boards which have, so I mean SBI or HDFC or all these banks have painted the town red saying now the rates of interest have fallen below 7%. So when the market, which is the formal market, can access capital at 8% or 7% or 7.5%, the so-called affordable housing is getting finance at 12%. That's extremely, ironical. The other thing that, I feel sometimes, Nitika, is that investment will come, but if you have an income tax law that says that I will send you a notice when your registration rate is, let's say, 24 lakhs for a house, but the real market is 18 lakhs. That's the sad reality, that your registration rates are far higher than what your actual price of the house is, even in affordable category. Then where do you find sanity? Should the registration rates not be reflecting the market reality? And some of those states have done it. Maharashtra has done it. Gurgaon has a downward revision in rates. But I think Delhi or Noida or and most of the states have yet to realize that pandemic has had an effect. Even when the government wants to get revenue, it can get more revenue by lowering the stamp duty rates to realistic rates. And I think if you look at the registration data of Bombay, the registrations have gone up to the extent of 30 to 40%. Revenue has gone up because they have lowered the registration rate. So I think these are some of the things. So I mean, is there a investment demand for affordable housing? Certainly yes. 2005, we went with this story to the world. We raised $550 million. I used to head a fund, $550 million, guys, when none of our team members had one bit of knowledge or the experience of putting a brick to the wall and making and selling one affordable house. So that's the kind of confidence the investors have. If you look at the clear winner of what is selling today in pandemic, there are two things that are clear winner. One is the logistics, because obviously logistics is a big sector and you will have a lot of logistic warehouses being built. At the same time, you have affordable housing as a big winner. I mean, if my business has survived pandemic is only because there are still people who are buying it. So investment, no question. I don't think so there is any question one should even doubt that there will be investors. There will be domestic investors, there will be foreign investors, there will be all kind of investors for affordable housing. The challenge is, what is the land that you are giving? Is it at the right location? Are you being able to provide service land? And the other thing that pains me in affordable housing is that there has been a reduction in the area, and that Mr. Jain also brought out, that if you are giving pigeonholes of 28 square meters, that is what DDA is doing. 28 square meters is like 300 feet. Can a family of 4 or 5 live in a 300 feet house? Forget about a room of 300 feet. It's a house of 300 feet. Will people not do illegal extensions? And guys, this house is being sold in the market at 18 lakh rupees. Of which the government wants 24 lakh rupees because that's a registration rate, which is even more expensive than the private housing. And this is the kind of, house that people call LIG. So I am reminded of a speech that Mr. Modi gave long time back in one of the sessions at the CRIDAI, and he said कि there was a 3-tier. पहले होता था रेल में 3 tier का डिब्बा, तो उसमें 3 berth होते थे, lower berth, middle berth and the upper berth. So it was very bad. The 3 tier was a very bad thing. तो उसको रेलवे ने 2 tier कर दिया, लेकिन वो बीच की berth जो है वो नहीं गई. So you still have a bogie which has 3 berths, and you start calling it as a 2-tier or second, class, I mean, just by changing the nomenclature, if you are saying LIG house is equal to 28 square meters, it is not LIG, it is probably EWS, but it is not serving the purpose. And as everybody knows, I mean, if there is pandemic, people want to work from home, 28 square meters is a very deficient area to work out of. So I think affordable housing, if one has to really think through, is dependent on service land, availability of service land at the right price. 2, it is a function of what your tax laws are, and if people know real estate has 2 taxes. When you buy, let's say, a sofa or a spoon or any commodity, you pay something called a GST. When you buy something immovable in pre-GST times, you paid stamp duty. Because electricity, petroleum, real estate, liquor, these are all things that have not been covered under GST. So today if you buy a house, you not only pay a GST, you also pay registration. So you're being taxed double. So that is a big hurdle in affordable housing. Then the government expects that people who will buy a house will get only 2 lakh rupees of benefit. Only 2 lakhs a year under Section 80, B. Why only 2 lakhs? If I am buying my first house, India में बहुत लोगों के पास मकान नहीं है. Nobody can say that India, everybody, house is still aspirational for a lot of people. So if I am spending money to buy a house, I am, helping the economy, why should I be taxed at all for my first house? If somebody buys a second house, don't give him any exemption. But at least for the first house, whatever he spends on that house should be completely exempt of any tax. And here the laws gives multiple concessions. I buy one house, I'm a rich guy, I will get that 2 lakh rupee benefit. I'll finish that, I'll buy the second house, फिर वो 2 lakh रुपए का concession मिल जाएगा मुझे. So you're giving multiple concessions to people, one after the other, but the guy who can afford only one house, you're saying, sorry honey, you will still be taxed because that's the law. So how ridiculous can it get? So I think the affordable house dream in India is a puppet, everybody's washed hands. सरकार कह रही है मुझे टैक्स पूरा लेना है, लिप सर्विस है कि GST रिड्यूस कर दिया 2%, the service land is not available, the lawmaker is saying, sorry, since you are doing illegal construction, I will come and harass you. The stamp duty rates is artificial high. If you are paying lower stamp duty, your registration, तो income tax वाला आपको harass कर रहा है. तो हर तरफ से there is harassment. And everybody says सरकार की नीति है, चाहे कांग्रेस हो, चाहे BJP हो, and I am, seeing that nobody has really worked on any law. And one reason may be that the housing is a state government subject, and every state government wants to milk. Mr. Kejriwal can give free electricity, free water, but आज तक केजरीवाल सरकार ने कहा कि साहब नहीं, sorry, you know what? In my state, I will reduce stamp duty to a reasonable level. I will make things in a manner where there are transactions, there is affordable housing. I don't see anything. What is the most cheapest, political points is what people want to earn, not do the real thing. And when it comes to affordable housing, real estate, it has been the neglect of every government successively. So as an industry person, as a person who's a student of urban planning, architecture, engineering, I practice in the industry, I feel very pained that affordable housing is very simple to do. It's just that it is made very complex because of the policy and the other stuff. I mean, our dictum was we used to buy land at 300 rupees a foot, saleable FAR, 1200 rupees construction, 1500 rupees, 2000 rupees foot में मकान बेचते थे. That's how I started my career. 2000 rupees for a 1000 square feet house, 20 lakhs, 22 lakhs. That is what we used to sell the house at. But today, dynamics are very different. Even if you want to do a business, you will still have a lot of additional costs, and you will probably end up selling a house more expensive. So there are pros and cons, but my own view is that there is no dearth of affordable housing investment. There is no dearth of the fact that there is technology. Technology is also available. There is dime a dozen technology. You can bring prefab homes. You can order them online. All the technology available. But the question is land and tax. If you solve these two issues, you will see a lot more cheaper houses, better quality houses in this country. That's my view.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. So what I hear from you is that though we are witnessing an increased urbanization and an inward migration to the cities, which is making a very significant change in the demographic profile of the urban nodes and the urban centers, the housing demand as such is still concentrated in the mid and the affordable segment. And currently, because of the change economic scenario in the last 1 year, affordable housing has again become as the focus and has become the dream of many. And right now in the market, the buying of homes is basically for self-use rather than for profit making or for booking your extra funds. So while we have certain, changes which like work from home, a reduced or rather an enlarged period of lockdown, and these aspects have put an emphasis on a safe and a healthy home environment for the people so that they can stretch themselves, they can have a kind of a comfortable living with their families and their loved ones. And what we need to create are certain financial enablers for this segment so that the outreach and the equity and the access can be partaken by the many. At this point in the discussion, I would like to bring in Ms. Nahid Majid. Nahid, I would like to request you to share your views on how, what is your experience in the international sector with respect to affordable housing. Maybe you could give us your ideas about your countries of experience and wherever you've worked with. That I think that would enlighten us.
Sure. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Nitika, for inviting me to speak today. What I'd like to do, though, I mean, you did a great pre-speak. I'm an urban planner. I've built a lot of housing in my time. I used to work in the construction industry for a long time, looking at sustainable placemaking, and then went into government to try and get investment into large-scale housing in the UK. And I'm developing, as you know, for KPMG India, a new investment model to try and get investment into kind of viable projects around governance and good, what makes the development happen. But I think what I'd like to begin is kind of distinguish between social housing and affordable housing, because I think the two of them are very interlinked, and there's a lot of confusion around both terms. So in terms of social housing, it kind of provides a very useful, helpful social net for those people that really can't afford homes. And you know, there's a huge history around the sale of council homes, etc. in the UK, but if we're looking at livability and diversity and inclusive cities, you know, we need to take stock of social housing as much as we do affordable housing. So, and in relation to what affordable housing is, affordable housing really provides much needed houses to those on low income. And the government in the UK declare that as around 30% of a monthly income, and that's kind of how they determine. So what has that meant? And I know the title of your talk today is around sustainability and around creativity, and I think what is demonstrated, and through the discussions here with the panel, is it's really an exciting time for the public and the private sector to really work together. And that doesn't just include things like developers and government, but it also includes investors and pension funds. And I've been doing a lot of work with investors and pension funds over the last 3 years. But if I give you three kind of big things that I've learned from this process, the first really has been around government policy. In the UK, the government has set up something called Homes for England. And one of the big first tasks that they did was to do an audit of public land. And that was really important, you know, taking stock of where government owned land, a lot of it brownfield, derelict old housing and so on. But actually a lot of local authorities and government just didn't know how much land they actually owned. And so, you know, taking stock of public land is really important. Homes for England has changed considerably over the last 10 years, and they've gone into huge amounts of issues around good design, modular housing, construction techniques and so on. So the first thing is around government policy, and a lot of the panelists have spoken about public land. You've got to take stock of public land, who owns it, because then you can be really creative about rental agreements. The second thing is around rental agreements, of what constitutes fair rent, discussions around part shared ownership of housing has happened now, where you're seeing a lot of developers now actually saying, these houses are for affordable rent through shared ownership. So that's something that's coming along as well, which is really creative. And what I'm going to do is take those 2 points in both order, because one of the things I've seen in the UK, which has been really exciting for me, is I've been working with Abu Dhabi Investment Authority that worked with a massive housing association, Fizzy Living, in just on the outskirts of London, going into partnership with a housing association. So there's an investor, global investor, going into partnership with a housing association. You're seeing the Emiratis in Manchester, around the developments around the football stadium, looking at social housing. You're seeing pension funds really delving into student housing. So that's a huge kind of new element where student housing is becoming a huge kind of market for pension funds. So those two are very interlinked, and you're seeing lots of deals now where government is owning the public land, is kind of leasing that to a private sector investor, and they're doing various kind of lease arrangements where the land is owned by government but leased to a private investor. So they're kind of very creative, and that's really exciting to be involved in that. The third aspect, which I'm kind of passionate about as an urban designer, as an architect, very passionate about, is about livable cities. And what you're seeing is two aspects. You're seeing the design of homes and being very creative about designing houses. So things like container cities, which you're seeing groups like urban space initiatives. So you're seeing these huge kind of trendy developers coming into the market, looking at creative ways. And there's lots of urban space. I can name tons of developers who are coming into that kind of creative design space, really targeting kind of different sorts of housing design. But alongside that, looking at that rental option as well. And alongside that, they're looking at construction methods. So, looking at modular housing, looking to Europe, bringing in sort of housing and coming along. And I think all of that is really important when we're looking at sustainable placemaking and ensuring, as kind of the discussions that have been going on today about making sure that cities are inclusive to all sorts of communities, whether we're talking about those who are accessing social housing, or we're talking about those accessing affordable housing. And I think that's really exciting. I mean, I've worked both in the public and the private sectors, and I'm really excited to see how now investors and pension funds are kind of going into that space. So I think there's a really good future for the whole affordable housing debate that's going on, but government needs to take directive, and I think that's where you have to take stock of where public land is first.
Thank you, Nahid. I think one of the most important points brought out by her was the difference between the affordable housing and the social housing. So we have to maintain that balance between the use, or rather the proactive use of the public land which is available, and some of the examples which were quoted here from UK are can be noted down for maybe further study and implementation, or maybe from an investment blueprint point of view also. So basically, while we are talking about the affordable segment, it's also the livability aspect, the sustainability aspect, and the inclusivity also of these projects, which is very vital. And that is how maybe especially in a country like India, the affordable housing segment needs to set itself a direction that maybe 5 or 10 years going forward from now, most of the affordable housing projects are more inclusive and more equitable. At this point, I would like to bring in Professor Rao back in again to share his views on how, let's say, the policies and the practices in the housing sector, especially the affordable housing sector, have evolved. Do you think a further enablement is required, or maybe we have been given the right enablement, but we are waiting for a response from the stakeholders themselves, whether the public and the private players, to make a more enriching ecosystem in this particular sector?
Yes, actually, if you look at most of the states in the country, they have enacted their own affordable housing policies. So it's not that India doesn't have affordable housing policies. Almost all the states have enacted their own affordable housing policies. There is also a national urban housing and habitat policy. But then the issue is, how do you break down this policy statement into tangible reality, where on the ground things will start rolling, things will start happening. For instance, in Haryana you have a affordable housing policy where developers are encouraged to come forward, bring land and put the housing together. Now, when you talk about affordable housing, as has been rightly said, there is the cost of the dwelling unit or the apartment, there is the cost of land, and land invariably is very, very expensive. So how do you offset the cost of land? Because the total product, if it has to be brought down to a reasonable price where people can afford, then you need to really cut down the land costs. So if you have to cut down land costs, then what are the methods that are available to you? One of the methods is that you should permit a very high density, so that on a limited amount of land you are able to build more. So in most of our cities you find that very high densities are not actually permitted. Unlike in several other parts of the world, Southeast Asia for instance, Hong Kong and other places, very high density, very high rise are permitted. But in our country we are actually fighting short. It is only in the recent past that we are doing it. The problem is also, when you go high rise, the construction costs actually shoot up to a very great extent. So therefore it is not, high rise is not the only solution. So there has to be a judicious mix between the height of the building and the density, so that the per dwelling unit land component is brought down to an optimal level, so that whatever is the land value that you have to load on to a square foot of built space, that is kept to a bare minimum. So herein you can actually do what is called a cross subsidy, wherein if you can't just play around with the height and the density, then you can also tie up these projects with commercial projects, with an IT park, or with an industrial estate, or with a mall, or some such kind of a thing, which means that you also have to bring in a very vibrant concept of mixed land use. So if you are able to bring all these concepts together, you can actually generate housing that's more affordable. Now this is as far as policy related to the urban planning part of it. But then that is not enough. You also have to look at policy related to taxation, and I think some of the points have already been touched upon by Mr. Agarwal just now. There are also issues like property tax, for instance. Even stamp duty, even bringing down stamp duty by just 1% can actually mean a hell of a lot. For instance, the government of Rajasthan, in some instances, they have brought down stamp duty to as less as 100 rupees, not in terms of percentage, but in terms of a round figure, which is a kind of a very nominal. I can give you the example of Andhra Pradesh, where in some of the low income housing projects, the property tax that is levied on an EWS house is just about 50 rupees a month, 60 rupees a month, which is a very simple round figure, easy to levy, easy to charge. He gave the example of Delhi government giving everything free of charge. That should not be done, but then at least we charge them something and don't give everything free, because anything that is given free is not valued. So the long-term maintenance costs in terms of water, or in terms of power, or in terms of property tax, you bring them down to very, very nominal levels, maybe a round figure which is very easy to charge, and there is no dispute on that. This is one thing that you can do on the taxation front. Certainly, yes, there is a double taxation that's happening, because on the one hand you are saying GST, on the other hand you are saying you also have to do a stamp duty, which is what you have to pay at the registration counter. In many states, in addition to the stamp duty, there is also a registration charge, and on top of that there is also computerization charge, because you have computerized the whole registration process. So for that also they are charging you, as if the government cannot afford even to pay for the computers and the printers. So government policy has to be broken down so that we take affordable housing to the logical end. Then the other thing is, when you look at the developers, now why will a developer come in? Because a developer is basically a businessman, he is a commercial operator. He will get into any business when he knows there is a profit to be made out there. And there are big developers, there are small developers, there are medium developers. So the kind of developers which this segment would attract would certainly be those small developers who would perhaps operate on smaller margins. So is it possible, like we have done in the software sector, where we said that the computer industry is a sunrise industry, and whatever profits that you make for the first 10 years is you are free of income tax and things of that sort. So if you can bring in some of these benefits on a large scale, you can attract developers to come into the affordable housing segment rather than to go into any other segment. The question of land, with which I started right in the beginning, how do you really bring down land costs? If you look at the example of Singapore, for instance, land cost is completely eliminated out, because land is almost free. Land is with the government, and the land is actually allotted at a very, very nominal rate. Even today, many development authorities in our country, they allocate land for the development of schools or for hospitals at a highly subsidized rate. So why can't you allocate land? If there is a developer who is coming and saying, look, I want to do affordable housing, I will sell these units at this particular price, then why can't the government come and say that, okay, I'll give you land at a predetermined price? The government is almost absolving itself by saying that, look, let the private developers take care of everything, we will not really get into the business, which is not really the right way of doing it. Now, having said this, I must also not fault the government for everything, because if you look at PMAY, for instance, in the last couple of years under the PMAY, you've seen enormous amount of low income housing that has actually come into the market. That is actually, and what is this? You call it affordable housing, you call it low income housing, you call it whatever you want, but it's all one and the same. In the price point of about 15 to 20 lakhs, a huge amount of housing has actually been generated under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which many people are not aware of. The numbers are actually available on they're in millions. These numbers are actually in millions. You can look on the PMAY website. The only last mile connectivity problem here is, again, what I talked about is the ecosystem. Even in the past, when housing was built by the government under the JNNURM, people did not go and occupy. Houses were lying vacant. And what is the simple reason? The simple reason is you don't have water, you don't have a bus service, you don't have connectivity. All you need to do is to give all these guys a bus pass, which is maybe free of charge. Any person who buys an affordable housing on the outskirts of Gurgaon or in Manesar or wherever, I'll give you a free metro ticket for the next 5 years. That's all that is needed, which will help a large number of low income households to move on to the outskirts. So I think small tweaking of policy at various levels, that can actually make affordable housing a reality. It's not such a big atomic science that you can't crack it. You can do it, provided all these little bits and pieces are put together in a serious manner, and I'm sure that we can solve this puzzle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of the audience here, I would like to thank you all in the esteemed panel for your views, your contribution, and sharing of all the knowledge. Your guidance in this sector is very important for us, and your remarks are also a source of encouragement for all the young professionals and the other listeners and the audience of this session. on behalf of the organizers, there is a small memento for you all, which I will accept.
I will request her, ma'am, to please give out mementos to the esteemed speakers. First we have Mr. Sunil Agarwal, MD Black Olive Ventures. Professor Dr. P.S.N. Rao, Director, School of Planning and Architecture. Mr. A.K. Jain, Ms. Nahid, and last but not the least, from Exhibitions India Group, a gift for you, ma'am, a memento for you. Thank you so much. Can we have a round applause? Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.